Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I of course am Carl, and we are back here with the Constellation Carl YouTube channel, taking a look at another episode of Vacuum Exposition. Now, for those that have been around for a while, you probably know all of this stuff, but I figure that every once in a while I do need to do kind of a new introduction and, well, just kind of introduce myself to those that have tuned in today. Now, few housekeeping things before we get on to our fanciful demonstration and historical significant portion of the video. Couple things have changed a little bit. Of course, I am back from my vacation, and it was fantastic. I was able to really relax for a while, and it kind of took me away from it all. I know I did get a video out to you guys just to make sure that you guys had content while I was gone. But make no mistake, we are back, and we are doing it like we usually do. And we are back in our October Hoover coffee can special month, where we are taking a look at Hoover uprights from the 1920s into the 30s that all had a motor that was placed on top of the base that looks kind of like an old coffee can, hence the name. Now, before we get to that, I had one more thing I did want to talk about on the channel. Now, if you've been around the channel for a while, I've mentioned several times that very good friends of mine have passed on a lot of their collections because of certain circumstances, whether that be death or moving and starting a new life somewhere else. But another old friend of mine reached out to me this past weekend and expressed that he has kind of gotten out of the vacuum gig. So he has invited me to come save on some of the pieces in his collection. So in probably the next few weeks or so, don't know yet, but I'm going to be making a trip to him and bringing back some more vacuum cleaners. So new things for the channel, of course, more things for us to talk about here, but I'm sure I'll do a vacuums rescued or something segment when I have all of them back. So but that is on the horizon for everybody tuning in. But anyways, let's get on to our video for today and take a look at another really cool one. All right, everybody, so we've got a pretty interesting one to take a look at today. Now, for those that have been watching the series or even been watching my channel, you're probably saying that Carl would probably seen something like this before. Yes and no. Now, this machine actually kind of fits in along with what I've been talking about the past few weeks about that Hoover special type series that they came out with in order to kind of be a budget-friendly option. This one is a little bit of a mystery to me. Now, this particular machine did come out of the collection of the late Jay Devine. This was, from what he told me, the very first coffee can Hoover that he had ever had. Hence why it's, been restored, but, it's not 100% original. Now, what we are looking at is a 1927 Hoover Model 543, originally. Now, the reason why I say that is because this has had some things done to it. As you can probably tell if you're a collector, this has had some replacement parts put on it. Now, I mentioned the Hoover Special Series because what this essentially was originally it was kind of the more budget option to the Hoover 700. And if you haven't seen my video on the 700, definitely go back and watch that. But that was a very interesting machine that came out, and the 700 being kind of the more deluxe option, with the 543 kind of being the more budget-friendly option. And I'll show the ad for that right here. Now, I'm taking a wild guess that you guys, if you didn't know, thought that this machine was the one on the left. I would not blame you for thinking that, because the 543 is actually the one that was on the right. And I'll actually show a up-close picture of that one right here. Now, what I can imagine that happened with this particular machine is as time moved on, as they kind of evolved the Hoover 700 series to the 750 certain machines stopped selling nearly as well. The 750 came out a little bit later in about 1930, 1932, and that one exclusively came out with a headlight. That was actually the first headlight that Hoover would put on a vacuum cleaner, and the first vacuum cleaner to have a headlight. Now, I have a couple of 750s in my collection, and I will say they look very similar to this. Now, the other coffee can motor Hoovers that we've talked about this past month, those have actually been later production models that did come with headlights on them standard, even the budget-friendly models. This one would never have come with that. So what I am guessing, now I love vacuum forensics because you just kind of get to see where things came from. Now the handle, I'll start with that. The handle actually has been replaced on this machine. This is just a conventional handle with a switch in the top, and this machine would not have originally come with this. Originally would have actually had, I believe, a switch that would have been next to the base over here, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the original handle that would have went on the 543 and I believe like the 575 and a couple others of those kind of more budget-friendly coffee can uprights was actually a long, straight broomstick-like handle that had a grip at the end of it, but it was just straight. There was no curve for your hand. It was just straight. So that has been replaced. Now, of course, while we're talking about the handle, I will talk about the cord. The cord has been replaced with a much later cord, which, to be honest, if you are running a vacuum with a cord from 1927 or earlier, you know, it's probably best, unless that cord is literally perfect, brand new feeling, very supple, and, you know, doesn't crack or have any cracks, I would have replaced that with something because, you know, you don't want to have any electrical issues whilst running your almost 100-year-old vacuum cleaner. This one being from 1927 is 99 years old this year. So we're not trying to start something that we can't finish. So, so it has a cord that was put on it. In addition to that, we get to the motor. Now, the motor, I believe, actually came off of a model 700. I believe it did. Just based on, I mean, obviously the coffee can is not painted like it was previous, but that has been changed. Now the top of the motor is where it gets interesting. As you can see, it kind of has this headlight setup right here. That was not factory. I don't know, though, if that was a Hoover company rebuild before the special series. It doesn't have any rebuild stickers or stamps or badges or anything on it, but from what it appears to me, it was probably a vacuum shop rebuild. They had a 700 and they had these aftermarket headlight setups. And I have a couple of different Hoover coffee can machines that have aftermarket headlight setups that are really, really cool. And I can't wait to show those too because, you know, they're just different, you know. But anyways, so this one has this aftermarket headlight cap on the top. And I just find it incredible because not only does it not look like what really would have come out on this machine, but it also has this long swoop back look to it that almost looks like early Kirby, if you know what I mean. The kind of the C&R series all the way through the early 500 series kind of had this swooped headlight that went to the front, and that's kind of what this looks like. Honestly, it looks like it could have used the same headlight trim as a Kirby. So that's pretty interesting. Now, on this machine, like I said, I believe it would have had the switch down near the base over kind of on this side. However, if you would have switched out the motor, you would have had to switch out the handle, which has been changed. So I think at some point they were trying to badge this thing up so that it looked like a newer machine in order to sell it and thus, you know, try to get more people interested in it because, you know, even back in the 20s, I can imagine that people were looking at something from the 30s and saying, man, I want that, but I don't have the extra $10 or $20 it costs to get the new model. Inflation being, you know, that could be the difference between like $50, $100, $200. So your next option was a 543 that was decked out with some aftermarket parts and pieces and motors and everything, and you have yourself a 750 lookalike in your house. Now, I've talked about that a couple times with other machines that were made to look like they were newer machines, and it's all part of this important history of vacuum cleaners. And I say that, and I know it's a little bit redundant, but, you know, I say that because this machine, you know, it had an important part in somebody's house. It was their workhorse for a very long time, and I am 100% sure when they went to go get a new vacuum cleaner, you know, they were conscious that they had a 750, but it really was a 543. You know, they felt like they had gotten, you know, a very, you know, upper crust, brand new vacuum cleaner, even though it was fairly brand new, but had, you know, accoutrements that would make it look like, you know, what was out right now. New car, like, feeling. So, but there's only one more thing that I did want to bring up on this machine about the looks of it. This came with a bag that had the scissored top bag spreader. I say that because if you look right up here, this is the bag topper for the machine. As you can see, it is held with two little hooks to hold the bag, and thus you have the bag topper. Now, the beauty of this machine is when the bag got too full, it would essentially pull this down, and then, you know, you still had more life in the bag, as well as you could kind of tell without it ruining the bag, because it gave you almost like this shock absorber, which was kind of like a pair of scissors on a spring. So that particular aspect of the machine is actually original, and would unfortunately become replaced over the years. These ended up getting broken and lost, as well as the types of bags that have those little hooks at the top. You know, they stopped making them after a while, so they really became outmoded. Now, that is original to this machine. So overall, if I was to, you know, take this machine all the way down to the pieces of it, the most original pieces of it is going to be the bag topper as well as the base. Of course, the label here on the front, but that is really everything that is original on this machine to 1927. Now, I would kind of almost classify this as a 1930 with the rebuild that was done on it, but I gotta put that it was this old. Now, the bag on this machine, it would have had a kind of a different look. Obviously, it would have said Hoover on it, but it is very special to this one because it was made by Jason. This was one of his famous bags. Of course, he would have had to fit new hooks and everything onto here, or at least take the ones off the old bag. Sometimes when the old bags were just worn out enough, he would just go ahead and take all the pieces of fabric and trace them out on new fabric, and make a bag, and then eventually, you know, like paint the letters or something on the bag itself. So this one didn't get that treatment, but I think this might have been towards the earliest of his restorations. So he probably was the one that actually replaced the cord and, of course, the bag. Now, the 543, like I said, it was a little bit more of the budget option, but that doesn't mean it was insignificant. Now, to collectors out there, the 543 is still a highly coveted vacuum cleaner, obviously, because it is part of this series. You know, I talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago in one of the videos, but, you know, when it comes to these coffee can Hoovers, they look as if they are the very first vacuum cleaner. So a lot of people value that look in their collection, even if it was not. So beginning and entry-level collectors absolutely love these things for that reason, making them a pretty desirable machine pretty much in any shape so long as they run and aren't corroded all the way through. These machines did tend to corrode and rust in certain places, which is why a lot of them have been scrapped or thrown away and all kinds of different things. This being, of course, another pre-war machine makes it rare in and of itself because it did survive the scrappings of World War II. So this machine just existing is a great feat. But that's what I really have on the old 543, so let's get on to our run demo and see how this thing does on the floor. Alright everybody, so the old 543 is all plugged in and ready to go. One other factor I did want to mention that we didn't really talk about in the other videos, but it is important because this is one of the earlier Hoover products. which kind of leads me to believe that maybe there is still the original motor in here. It may just be covered with new casings around it, but there is a little hole right here on the top of the motor. There's 3 letters around it. That's OIL. Now, one thing I had to do before I got this thing up and going is I had to get a little bit of electric motor oil and dab it into that hole, because these early Hoovers, you actually had to oil the motor periodically to keep them all lubricated. So that is a factor that the 543 would have originally had, which case the 700 or other later models, it was a little bit different. You had to service the motor a little bit differently. But anyways, that is an interesting factor that I just realized once getting ready for this video. But anyways, let's get to it and see how this thing does on the floor. Well, everybody, the old 543 did a really good job, actually, which, you know, it's actually pretty notable, and a reason why I had to say something about it, because this is the first time that this machine has been turned on, ran, and vacuumed since its previous owner passed, which, you know, I got all those machines back in 2021, which actually is the 4-year anniversary. Literally, my wife was just telling me a little bit ago before I started filming that today we were in Kansas 4 years ago there to try to rescue Jay's collection and get it secured so that last year when I went to pick it up I could bring it all home. And you know, so that's about 4 years of it sitting in my care, and then another, you know, 5 to 10, you know, when it was in his care, where it probably hadn't ran in quite a while. It was probably just on display for a very long time. So this machine probably hasn't ran in a good 5 to 10 years, I average, but by no means was it not loved, I will say. So, but it did a really good job, and I hope you guys all enjoyed our little run demo for today. Well, everybody, today was a really great day. It was really, really fun to get this one out. You know, Jay didn't talk about this one much. I think it's mostly because that he had gotten others in his collection that he had just really appreciated more at the time. But I've always held, you know, this particular machine high since I knew that it even still existed. This one, when I found it at his house after he'd passed away, was actually sitting in his sewing room, which was behind his vacuum gallery. So if you haven't seen the tour I did of his house, please go back and watch that, because you'll see this one kind of sitting in a corner. But this was one that, you know, it didn't get its chance to spend more time in the room that he had all these types of machines in. Like I said, I think is because he got something that was more original that he felt would be better to show if guests had come over. But all the while, this machine is very, very special in and of itself. Like I said, I'm convinced that this is his very, very first coffee can upright, so I do believe that this was special to him all the same. But either way, I hope you guys all enjoyed our little video today. It was a very fun one to film. But we will continue on with our coffee can series next week. We'll take a look at another really cool one. So have a great rest of your day, y'all.